Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, President Obama and his Environmental Protection Agency announced their final clean power grab, continuing the economic assault on energy-producing states like West Virginia. Yesterday, Alpha Natural Resources, one of the nation's largest coal producers, filed for bankruptcy, same day. As of the end of 2014, Alpha had 4,870 employees at 33 active mines and 13 prep plants in West Virginia. Alpha follows Patriot Coal, Jim Walter Resources, and James River Mining, all of which have filed bankruptcy since 2014. According to the Mine Safety and Health Administration, coal mining employment has dropped from 143,437 in 2011 to 98,310 in the first quarter of this year. That represents a 31% drop over the last 4 years. Earlier this year, when Murray Energy announced hundreds of layoffs in northern West Virginia, the Wheeling Intelligencer newspaper reported that the impact would mean almost $62 million in annual income lost wages for Ohio Valley residents. Other communities have also been hard hit. Nicholas County, a small county in my state, was forced to lay off sheriff's deputies because they could no longer pay their county commitments because of the decline in coal severance revenues. 17 coal units in West Virginia have been retired, due at least in part to EPA policies. The electricity produced by these units is enough to power 2.7 million homes. Put another way, the units that have already closed in West Virginia would generate enough power to power the entire state of Hawaii. Mr. President, these are not the same old talking points as the administrator of the EPA and the president said. These are not stale. This is not motivated by special interests. These are real Americans, real jobs, real families, and real communities that have been negatively impacted by this administration's overreaching regulations. People like Tammy Rowan of Colton, West Virginia, who wrote me a letter, quote, "My whole family has concerns with the regulations that seem to be out of control. EPA, government officials, and the president are putting our families out of work." Or Patrick Sparks in Warrior Mine, West Virginia, who said, quote, "I know the EPA has been trying to force strict regulations on coal. It's hurting a lot of people, not just here in West Virginia, but a lot of businesses are suffering from it." And Teresa Simmons of Triadelphia, West Virginia, her family has worked in coal mines for generations. She wrote, quote, "My husband was able to provide for our family with just his income. We were able to donate money to local charities and help needy families around the holidays. Now, that's going to be my family looking for donations," end quote. Put simply, yesterday's announcement will make an already bleak economic situation in our state much, much worse. Working families across the nation woke up to the sad news that their jobs just don't count. Much has been said about the open process that led to this final rule. In fact, West Virginia, which is one of the most deeply affected states by this regulation, was not even visited by the EPA after having extended me and others extended many invitations. Instead, they went to cities like Chicago, Boston, San Francisco. Talk about special interests. Talk about being bold. The administration's final clean power grab will force states away from affordable, reliable energy towards expensive, intermittent power sources, many of which are heavily subsidized by the taxpayer. It proposes benchmarks that are more stringent and less attainable. In West Virginia, our emissions rate under the proposed rule was to drop 20%. On Monday, the final rule requires our rate to drop by 37%, a drop that is almost twice as severe. There is no way for West Virginia to comply with this rule without significant cuts to our coal production, coal jobs, and coal use. According to the EPA's own calculation, the final rule is worse for coal than the proposed rule. Coal's share of electric generation will go to 27% by 2030 under this rule, as compared to 39%, which we currently have, or did in 2014. If this misguided final rule is ever implemented, pain will be felt by all Americans with fewer job opportunities, higher power bills, and less reliable electricity. Studies of the proposed rule projected that the Clean Power Plan will increase electricity prices in a state like mine 12 to 16%. What does this mean for American jobs? A recent study by the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association found that a 10% increase in your electricity prices can mean as much as 1.2 million jobs lost. Roughly 500,000 of these job losses would be in rural communities like those of West Virginia. Excuse me. Put simply, affordable energy matters, especially to those who, excuse me. Affordable energy matters, especially to those who the administration incorrectly says will benefit the most from this rule, which is the lower moderate income. More than half of West Virginia's households take home an average of less than $1,900 per month and already spend 17% of their income on energy. These families are especially vulnerable to the administration's clean power grab. While states are given additional time to comply under the final rule, it does not change the fact that the EPA is picking winners and losers in the energy economy. And the losers will be the American families who rely on affordable, reliable energy. We can and we should innovate for the future, but not with a sledgehammer bearing down on us. Thankfully, there are several legislative options that Congress can pursue to challenge this rule. Tomorrow, the EPW committee will be taking up my legislation, the ARENA Act. Let me explain that briefly. This bipartisan legislation would empower the states to protect families and businesses from electric rate increases, reduced electric reliability, and other harmful effects. It will force EPA to reconsider this misguided rulemaking. The ARENA Act holds the EPA accountable by requiring the agency to issue state-specific model plans, demonstrating how each state will meet the required reductions. It gives states the ability to opt out if the plan hinders economic growth. For existing power plants, the ARENA Act delays implementation of the Clean Power Plan until the courts determine the legality of the rule. Recently, the Supreme Court ruled that the EPA had unlawfully failed to consider costs when formulating the MATS regulation. Because the rule went forward while it was still being litigated, millions of dollars were spent to comply with a rule that was ultimately deemed illegal. States should not be forced to proceed under the legality of the rule until the legality of the rule has been determined. And I hope that many states will follow Leader McConnell's suggestion and delay implementation of this rule until the legal process is completed. Mr. President of the United States, your clean power grab will devastate already hurting communities in my state. It will cause economic pain for working families across the country. It will forever harm our energy landscape. The proposed rule was bad. The final rule announced yesterday is even worse, doubling down on the destruction of our economy. There's no question that we must take steps to protect our environment, but it simply cannot be at the expense of our families. We can do better. Like Congress, the elected representatives make these decisions. That's the way it should be. I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting the ARENA Act and sending these overreaching EPA regulations back to the drawing board. Thank you.